Hi, it's Miss Lee, and welcome to Full Steam Ahead New Jersey. And today we are working on our Constellation Station experiment. So, what we're actually going to be doing, we'll talk a little bit about stars and constellations, and then you are going to try to make your own constellation. Two of them, actually. You'll make one constellation that's like a famous one that has a story behind it. And the second one, I want you to make up your own. And then maybe you can find someone in your family, like a brother or a sister or a grown up, to try to guess what your constellation is. So before we get into the constellation, I want to talk just for a couple minutes about what a star is and what exactly a constellation is. So we're going to look at just a couple pictures I brought up. Here we go. So if we were to go out into space and you were to fly by some stars, they don't look static or just like a little shining light. You actually see flickers, which we don't really see in the night sky as easily because we are so far away. But a star is actually a burning ball of gas. It's not solid. If you wanted to try to land on a star, there would be nothing to land on, beside from the fact it would be way too hot and it would burn up or melt up anything that you tried to put in too close to the star. So stars are primarily made up of helium and hydrogen gases. So you are probably most familiar with helium. If you've ever had a balloon that you've taken home from a party where you let it go and it floated away on you, that is helium. There was helium inside that balloon. So the ones that float to the ceiling. So the reason they float is because they are lighter than air. But that is one of the gases that makes up a star. So between all of the pressure and the heat, they get engulfed in flames, and that's what makes the light that you see in the night sky. So next time you go out and you look at stars in the sky, I want you to also observe the different colors that you see. Usually we think of like yellow or white for stars, but if you look closely at night, you'll start to see some that look a little bit blue or maybe even a little bit red. And the reason you see different colors has to do with their temperature. They're all hot, but there is a range of temperature, and the hottest ones are going to look blue. Then the kind of medium ones will look white to yellow, but the coolest stars are going to look red. So if you look really closely, the next time you're outside at night, you might see a red star. And another star, our closest star actually, is the sun. So even though we don't see it at night like the rest of them, we see it during the day, because the sun is what gives us day. The earth is constantly rotating around its own axis. We're spinning. And as we face the sun, that gives us daytime. And then as we turn and face away from the sun, it gets dark and we get nighttime. But when we're facing away from the sun, that gives us the opportunity to see the light from all the other stars. The other stars are always there. They're just blinded or bleached out basically by the light of our own sun, our star. So a constellation is just a pattern of stars. Before there was TV, before there were video games, people used to lay out and they would just look up at the sky and they would look for pictures, and then they would imagine stories to go with these pictures. And a lot of these stories have persisted. So let's look at a couple famous examples. First, we'll look at just the constellation, and then we'll see what the people envisioned it. So obviously these lines are not really in the sky. So people had to do this in their imagination. So Orion, this one's actually a person. Once I say that, you can start to see a body, some arms. Orion is a hunter. So this is his shield. This is his body with his armor on it. And then his other hand, he was hunting with a club. And where I live, there's quite a bit of light pollution, which means a lot of extra light from like buildings and street lamps. I can't see the stars all that well, but one of the easiest things for me to see in the night sky is Orion's belt. So these 3 stars right here, for me, appear pretty bright, so I can see those good. If I really try hard, I can start to see a little bit of his shield and these bright stars that are his shoulders. But the easiest thing for me to find is Orion's belt. So if you live around me in New Jersey, that could be something you go outside and look for. Another constellation is called Draco. So I'm actually going to add the lines in on this one while you try to imagine what Draco might be. So I'll give you a hint. It's supposed to be a mythical creature. So something with a long, slithering body. So let me bring up the next page for you to see that Draco is supposed to be a dragon. So here's his dragon head and then his long body. And Draco actually means dragon. And here's one of my favorites. This is an animal. His name is Leo. He has a tail. This is his body and a big mane around his head. What kind of animal has a big mane around its head? That might sound a little bit like Leo the lion. So there you go. There's his head and his body and his tail. So as you can see, this took a lot of imagination. They really had to sit back and think, and they dreamed up stories that went with all of these constellations and how they interacted. So what I want you guys to do with your kit, what you should have, you'll need some toothpicks and you'll also need some gumdrops. So the gumdrops are going to represent the stars, and the toothpicks are going to represent those imaginary lines that connect all those stars together. So you have 2 tasks to do with this activity. The first one is I want you to try to recreate one of those constellations, and your handout has another one, a canis, which is a dog. So I want you to try to recreate with your gumdrops and toothpicks one of those constellations that we talked about. So I did Draco. I gave it its head and then its curling body, and I could even make that a little longer. And you can use your black paper just to help you visualize it. It gives you some contrast so you can see a little bit better. So after you recreate one of the ones in the handout or in the pictures that I showed you, I want you to try to create your own. So it can be a shape, it could be a letter, it could be a person, it could be an animal that we didn't cover, but I want you to try to make your own. So you might have to use a little bit of imagination. So remember, the gumdrops are your stars. The toothpicks, the toothpicks are your lines. So I want you to try to put one together and then see if you can get somebody to guess. All right. It might be hard. You'll see it because you dreamed it up, but it might be a little harder for somebody to see. But that's kind of the fun. You can quiz them and see if they can figure them out. If you have enough gumdrops and toothpicks, you can make as many as you want, but I do want you to make at least 2. So one famous constellation and one that you came up with on your own. Okay, so I would love to see any results that you guys made, and I will see you next time. Bye.